That CPD Show.
Welcome back to That CPD Show. My name is Chris and I'll be your host for today. And today my guest is Gavin Smith of the Church Office. Gavin has 21 years of church management and administration experience. He's passionate about the gospel and strengthening the church by supporting the work that happens behind the scenes. Gavin had a brief professional career with Cardiff City. Very good, very good. Yeah. And in his spare time, he's a director of UCAN, which is the UK Church Administrators Network. And he lives in Newport in South Wales, where he serves as the church manager for Christchurch in Newport. Gavin lives with his wife Emma, and they have 4 lively children and a dog called Max as well. So Gavin, what a bio. Great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Oh, mate, thank you very much for inviting me to come. It's great to be here. And yeah, that sounds like a lot of stuff there.
Well, it is a lot of stuff. I think you need to tell us a little bit about your brief Cardiff City career. What kind of footballer were you?
It was a brief one. Do you remember the old 3-5-2 system?
Yes.
That we used to play? I used to be a sweeper and then kind of come into the field, and that was my kind of position. So I left school 16, went to Cardiff City Football Club, hoping for big dreams. My parents had turned down various contracts with other bigger clubs, but it was like, you're not leaving Wales, you're staying here. And so, so I stuck around. I was there for 3 years, and then I played a game for Wales, got a couple of caps in. You can probably notice the picture, the shirt behind, under 18s, and it's kind of promising career, hoping to go and do it, but God had different plans. My contract was kind of cut short, wasn't renewed. We had a kind of change of management. I played at Braintree Town, went off to kind of some non-league clubs, and then got to the kind of point where I thought, what am I actually about? What am I living for? And I was kind of traveling across the week to go and play games. And and I just thought, okay, I'm not sure about this. I'd met my wife at that time. I was like, okay, this is way more important. So got a job, did some coaching, did a whole bunch of stuff in sport. Ended up being at the Welsh Assembly government, looking at how sport could influence and affect young people's lives for the positive. And I did that for a year. And then my senior pastor rings me up and says, Gav, we think you might be called to ministry. I was like, really? Okay. Well, give us 1 year, they said, and I haven't left 21 years. So
wow,
yeah, that's kind of the story from 16 to where I'm at now. So
brilliant. Well, we're going to dub you as the Beckenbauer of the podcast, the sweeper, kind of mopping up, and looking forward to it. So really excited to talk with you all about things to do with the church office and church management and administration and things like that. But before we do dive into all of those things, it would be remiss of us not to talk about desserts. This is a podcast that does talk about church and things like that, but we also talk about dessert. It's very, very important. So Gavin, I do have to ask you, what is your favorite dessert?
My favorite dessert, I did think about this for quite a while, is probably a creme brulee. Now, ooh. I can't make this myself. So it's one of those things that if Emma and I are out for a date night or we're heading out for dinner or something with the family, if it's on the menu, it is a given to the whole family that we are going to have dessert, and we're committed to do it. And it's a favorite, love it. And it's top of the list.
It's one of those desserts where you have to have it at a restaurant, in my view.
Yeah.
Because if you have one of those ones that you can get at home where you pour the sugar on and then you try and put it under the grill, it just never works. Yeah. And then you either have a hot creme brulee, but you've got the top, or you've got a cold creme brulee, which is obviously what it should be, but that top one just doesn't work. So you've got to get the crack, haven't you? You've got
to get the crispiness on top. And I love it when it's served with a little bit of shortbread. So if you say to me, like, what's your favorite biscuit? I'm in for a shortbread every time. So Christmas is my thing. Like, I love Christmas and shortbread. So combination of the shortbread with the creme brulee, man, beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great dessert. I think a very, very good choice, and a very sort of classy choice as well, I would definitely say. And I do love a creme brulee. When I see it on the restaurant, I am always drawn to a creme brulee. Very much it's on that kind of list. It's not one of those ones that I would pass over. I go, oh yeah, go on, I'll go for a creme brulee. But never at home. You can never do it just unless you have a blowtorch. which I
Yeah.
don't have. Not who really has one of those these days.
I wouldn't be safe with a blowtorch, so
No, exactly. No, I'm exactly the same. Yeah, not many people would have that at home. Well, creme brulee is an excellent choice with a shortbread biscuit, obviously on the side as well. Very good choice. Brilliant. Well, we are here to talk about the church office. You're representing the church office
Yeah.
today, but I thought it'd be really great just before to sort of dive into it, and just I'd love to hear a bit about the kind of the heart, the mission. Maybe tell me a little bit about the church
Yeah.
office itself. What do you do? What's the mission? Tell me all
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, sure. Well, it started in kind of lockdown, and our senior pastor of our church, we've got a big church, fairly big church with a staff team, and during the kind of the first week of lockdown, he kind of called us together on Zoom and said, right, how can we use this time to serve other churches? I want you to go away and to think about in your different areas how you could bless other churches with that mindset of, okay, when we get back from COVID, what is it going to be like? What are going to be some of the challenges? And so we were all encouraged to go away and pray and consider and ask God, okay, what would that look like? And so I thought, do you know what? I wonder if I could be a blessing to churches who didn't have a church manager. What could I do to serve them coming out? Like whether that's risk assessments or policy, procedure, or just helping them with their structures, getting things going again. How do you do that with volunteers when people are just not interested in volunteering in the same way as they were before COVID, all those kind of things. And so I set up a website, and I kind of templated up all the documents that I'd used over the last 20 years, put them all on the website and said, right, let's give them away free. And then let's get a podcast going and talk about the context of kind of behind the scenes ministry. And I was just aware that there just wasn't any kind of, as an elder or pastor or minister, you can go to a conference, you can get training, you can get additional stuff. But if maybe you're a treasurer, or maybe you're in finance or buildings or administration, what is there for you to support you? And so that's really, really the heart behind it. How could I support particularly leaders who didn't have someone in my role? And that was a kind of clear message from God. And so I launched a church office, and God just seems to be blessing it. I sometimes I think I'm just, what am I doing? I'm just winging it a bit, trying to serve. And we've got over 1,700 churches across the world that have subscribed to the website and are using the materials. And so we've developed it with training, we've developed it with kind of articles, just things that we can do that maybe serves. And there's a whole number of services now where we offer things like a back office review, and we'll come in to your church and look at your administrative structures and operational staff things, and we'll say, right, how are you doing? How could you improve this? What's the church seeking to do, and how can we get behind you? So we've done lots of that. Training courses, we've started developing a whole bunch of stuff. So that's really the heart. How can we support leaders who, when you chat to leaders, someone did a bit of research on it, particularly in the Anglican Church, and they were saying that leaders were spending 50% of their time doing kind of administration and operations. That's a huge amount of time for a minister to be spending on something that they're not necessarily called to do. Maybe they're not even trained to do. Maybe they're not got no interest in doing. And you're like, actually, these are the things that really need dedicated time to be done every week. But yet, the pressure's on pastors and on those leaders. So, so my heart was like, right, what can we do to bless them? Let's bless them as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think really that for those ministers that are they have to do both because maybe they don't have someone like yourself to take a role like that. How do they balance that sort of, having to be the kind of, a visionary leader, to, the kind of leadership style side of the job, but they've also got to, make sure that they are effective in administration. How do you balance that? Or how, you've got 21 years of experience in this area working in church life. How do ministers in that environment, how do they maintain both those things? Because, there's a charity to run, but there's also a church to run as well. How do they balance that between the sort of administration and leadership?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think a lot of it depends on the kind of size of church you are. And I think the more I spend with church leaders and other churches, and you start to kind of model what people are doing. If you're a church of 50, and you've got a kind of a single minister who's leading it, you might need some kind of support around the outside. But most of that time, that's kind of voluntary. But if your church starts growing and you get to 75 or 100, suddenly like the dynamics of that change, and you as a leader, you're not going to be able to get to know everyone anymore, or know everyone's passions, and know where to place people in serving in their gifting. And you're dealing with less. But as you grow to 100, you need to kind of start to have some structures and systems in place and some dedicated time. And so you need to kind of start to develop that. And I think one of the things I've noticed in churches is that we're often really good at kind of raising up and training our next minister to come into a post, but we're not really great at training up leaders at those areas of like, okay, we want you to oversee the welcome, we want you to oversee the care groups, we want you to oversee our outreach and our mission, and so developing teams and leaders in those areas. So those are the things that can really make a difference. So when we talk about administration, we can often think it's kind of like it's restrictive and it stops you from doing stuff. And maybe you've had an experience with a deacon or a treasurer that's been like that, but that's not our heart at the church office. How I think for us is, how do we enable ministry to happen? How do we get alongside a senior leader and say to them, right, what are some of the areas that you're weak in? What are some of the areas that you need help in? Like, let's take that off you and let's do it. And I think we see those things in scripture. If you take something like Acts 6, and you may have covered this on previous podcasts, but the challenge of the widows turns up, and it's a distraction from the gospel being preached. And those early leaders are going, right, what do? We can't give ourselves to feeding the widows and waiting on tables. And so they raise up Stephen and they appoint these people to take care of that work so that they can give themselves to the word and prayer. And then, later in that chapter, it says, the word was preached and the church multiplied. So there's this connection between kind of practical ministry and the church spiritually growing and the church being healthy as well, because of that little bit of organization and management, if you like. So yeah, I would love churches to kind of embrace it and think, right, actually, it's not restrictive. It's actually, we want to enable you to do more as a leader, and that's the exciting conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something on your website that I've seen, which is you use the term church management rather than church administration, which I'm sure administration comes up as well. But it made me think about what the need for management within the life of the local church. I wonder, for you, what does good church management look like?
Yeah, this is a really good thing, and there's an article on our website that's got the kind of 10 benefits to good church management. I think one of the things that we try and do on the church office is we want to try and understand what's the church's vision. What are you praying that God would do in your church? And we want to start there. We want to start with that sense of we really feel like God's calling us to reach into this local community and reach out to young people. That might be your vision for the church. And then we want to say, right, okay, well, what would support that ministry to do that? So you're going to need certain policy. You're going to need your safeguarding policy, and you might need a lone worker policy, and you might need some risk assessments to say, how safe is that if we're going to be sending people on the streets to do some outreach? What are some of the activities that are going to be involved in delivering that mission and that vision? What supports that we can do that safely? What resources are we going to need? So what are the people that we need? What are the training that those people need in order us to fulfill that vision? What support do we need in congregation? Who can be praying for us? What are the things that we want folks to pray for as we go out and do this vision and this work? And so it's kind of that coordination of all of those things. We want to get behind a vision. And so if you can we always say in our teaching, if you can get your budget and your finances and your kind of volunteer and staff roles and maybe even your building, if you've got a church building, if you can get those things aligned with your vision, the delivery and the output and what you can achieve for God is quite significant, because all those things are aligned. If you haven't got a budget to go and reach out to young people in the community, then your vision's never going to go forward. It breaks down. So how do we get an idea of, okay, our finances have got to be aligned with our vision, right? That's going to take some thought, some management, some strategy, some understanding. And I'm passionate and excited about that. So I'm not the one in our church who's going, right, here's the vision. I'm the one in our church going, right, how do we make this happen, guys? Right, we've got gifting in this area. We've got people who love this. We've got people in that local area. we've got finances. Okay, how much money do we think we need? I'm thinking of all that stuff and getting excited about that stuff. And I think that's the kind of good church management, rather than saying, right, you need 10 policies and you need to do this and you need a cash flow and you need all these things. Well, if they're going to serve our vision and what we're trying to do for God, then I'm all in. And that's for me what good church management is. And I think God's placed that kind of leadership gifting in our church to serve us. And I think the hard bit is sometimes just finding who those people are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly something I've seen with. There seems to always be a kind of a tension that exists in church life where there's a great vision to achieve something, and then the people that sit in the church office go, right, okay, to be able to achieve that, we've got to do X, Y, and Z. We've got to have the risk assessments, and we've got to have the safeguarding done, and very quickly it can be that form beats the function, or process comes up against vision because we can't do it, or we can't be as quick because we have to follow all these XYZ process. And of course those processes are really important and we've got to do those things, but the two can seem to war against one another. And I wonder, how can we balance those two? Because I understand that there's a need for, we've got to have the right process, we've got to keep people safe, we've got to make sure that we are being responsible and all these things. But at the same time, if the weighting goes too far to that side, it can become so process driven. But then of course you want a visionary driven thing, but if it comes too visionary driven and we don't think about process, then we're missing something. So how do we get that balance right? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting. So let me give you an example of this. So coming out of COVID, our kind of elders of our church were saying, right, we really want our church to grow in hospitality and fellowship. So the elders get together and they have this little planning meeting with none of the staff or anything. And they come up with an idea. So they say, right, we want to teach on hospitality. We want to model it ourselves. And then thirdly, we want the church to experience it and eat together and just enjoy that time. So that's our vision strategy. Okay. And so they go, right, what we're going to do is we're going to have a hot meal for everyone every single week. And you go, for the next 3 months. And this is coming out of the elders. And you're like, okay, so for us, that's like 600 people every week to be fed. Okay, that's pretty tough. So I start to kind of take a list and I start writing down, and I'm saying, like, guys, I'm 100% behind this. I see this vision. What we're going to need is we're going to need like an £18,000 budget for food. We're going to need like a new oven in the kitchen. We're going to need new tables. We're going to need people who are trained in catering and hospitality, and they're going to have to be qualified. We're going to have to sort out our insurance, and I exactly what you're saying, Chris. Suddenly the wheels are coming off because you're thinking, oh no, this is it. But what was lovely is I was able to say to the guys in our eldership team, I think our capacity in our church is this: we could probably do this once a month for the next year, rather than this intense process of every 3 months. And I was able to kind of bring that leadership into that conversation and say, all right, if we do this, we're going to burn everyone out. We're going to run out of resources. By week 4, you're going to be saying to me, I don't think we should do this anymore. But we were able to do it over a year, and our church love it. And it's suddenly become a ministry that we do every single year, and the church loves it and delights in it. And we're not burning people out, and yet we're achieved everything that we wanted to achieve in terms of the mission. And so some of it is just the disposition of the person, maybe, who's driving that. But if we recognize that there's some leadership that we need in terms of operations, if we give a little bit of room for that in our team, that actually listen to that voice that's coming in from outside saying, okay, that sounds, let me pull the handbrake up a minute and just say, can I ask these questions? My heart is to go, right, I'm in 100%. We're going to do this. But there is some steps that we need. And yet there's been other decisions where I'm like, okay, I wouldn't necessarily agree with this fully. I'm thinking I'm risk averse. I'm going to have all these questions, but it's the right decision. And at the end of the day, I often will say to the guys, well, I'm not a trustee here. You guys are, and you really believe this could work. I'm with you in this. So part of it is the heart and the person. Part of it is giving room for the gift. I think, we see that spiritual gift in scripture, the kind of the gift of administration. And as you look into the meaning of that word, it means like a steersman, and it means like a leadership gift that comes in. So if you think about a boat and a ship, you've got a captain on board who might be the leaders who are saying, right, this is where we're going to go. But you need someone to sit on the wheel and drive it and know what teams that we need on board the ship. We know the number of stops we're going to have to make because we've got to restock resources and, that kind of thinking. So I think for a lot of church leaders, it's their area of weakness. So they don't want to be exposed as well, or they don't want to kind of include other people where there's gifts. And I'm saying, no, come on, let's recognize this gift and plug it in and use it for the kingdom, and to grow the kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. What I love about what you said there was, it's giving that example of the food every week, and I thought, oh my goodness, how on earth do you achieve something like that? But what I thought was brilliant with what you did, and I think ministers can pick up on this, is that what you didn't say was can't achieve it, absolutely ridiculous, no chance, and dig your heels in and go, this isn't going to work. You're off your rocker. No chance. What you said was, we can achieve this. I see the vision, see what you're trying to achieve. And almost you dug underneath the ask. So what are you trying to achieve? What you're trying to achieve is this sense of community, togetherness. Now, with our resources, we can achieve this and it'll actually achieve what you're looking to achieve in actually a better way. So what you've now done is you've taken it to a place where it's actually much more sustainable, and actually that's getting a better long-term result, rather than it being this kind of leadership people over there, administrative people over here, and they can't ever seem to come together. Two tribes going to war, and I love that about it because I think it seems like it's a much better way of serving because it helps, and also I think it makes it. It's administration that's spiritual, and I think sometimes we can think, and I'd love for you to talk to this. Is I think sometimes we can see the administrative side, the management side, is the kind of the non-spiritual work. It's the non-ministry side of stuff. Talk to me about that, because I know that you'd see that as something that'd be very much spiritual work.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the kind of lens that we want to put on everything. So I learned this very early on. So my first year as a church manager, I was kind of managing a staff that were much older than me, and I'd inherited a whole bunch of people. And I remember the week, and this had a huge impact on me. I remember the week of our caretaker would come in on a Monday and a Friday, and he'd lay the chairs out in the hall. And he would take forever. And I was like, there's other things that need doing, there's maintenance, and it was a real kind of Friday afternoon was frustrating. And so I, poor leadership, I pull him in the office and I'm like, right, tell me, why does it take you so long to put the chairs out? I can do this in 45 minutes, just lacking any humility, and he says to me this, he said, Gav, he said, the thing is, what I love to do when I lay the chairs out is I love to pray for the people that are sat in those seats on Sunday. And he's like, you'll see me wandering at the top end of the hall where our young people sit, and I'm praying that God would speak to them today through his word. And I remember when I eventually got off the floor, because it was one of those like bus hits you, and you're like, wow, I did not see this. But this guy, our caretaker, John Gillespie, has made a connection with the practical thing that he's doing to the gospel, and his joy and his motivation and his service is not coming from his pay package or his benefits. It's coming because he's connected it to something that's our mission and our vision. And there's joy in it, there's life in it. And that for me was a big kind of milestone for me. It's like, right, how do I help people connect their practical work to the gospel? If I can do that, then they will love it. They will love what they do. They will enjoy what they do. So if you took any team, and in our training we say this, you take any team in church, how does that link to the gospel? So you're on welcome. What is that about? You're going to welcome like Christ welcomes us. You're going to be hospitable. You're going to be taking an interest. You're going to go after people and search them out. And that links us to the gospel. Your hospitality team. You're creating tea and coffee at the end and the time of fellowship. Why? Because you want people to connect, and that's what the gospel does, isn't it? It brings us together from all different places and connects us. And you're like, actually, that's so. If I can train someone in hospitality and say that's the reason why, because it leads to the gospel, there is life in that. So my job is to connect people all the time to that kind of reality. And people just say, oh, I just do the PA or I just do the cameras. And you're like, Oh, wow. No, no, no. You got this wrong. You are doing gospel ministry and you're helping and contributing to something that's going to have an impact. And the good news of Jesus going out there to people, that's what we're passionate about. And so how you're playing a part in that. And people don't see that. So if we can make that connection, it's a massive win.
Absolutely. It reminds me of Genesis chapter 1, the creation passage talks about, God. It starts off with these kind of chaotic waters,
Yeah.
and then what happens is God brings order into this
Yeah.
thing. So, and actually, the process of bringing order is actually very much a creative act. You're taking something that was disorganized and bringing it into a sense of order. And it talks about the Garden of Eden, and it's almost this orderly place of God's order in there. And I think there's something that's really and doing church management, these kind of things, or even these kind of roles, they are bringing a sense of order into God's house. Whereas before, if no one does
Yeah.
the words, we're all at sea, aren't we?
Yeah.
Where it's
Yeah.
chaos, because we don't know what to sing, we don't know what the line is next. I mean, I'm a worship leader, and I don't know what the next line is, so I need their help. And so otherwise
Yeah,
we
it's
just have
true.
chaos. Similarly, if we've got no one to set the chairs out, and we've all got to sort of find seats on the floor, it becomes chaotic very, very quickly. And so all of these roles have a creative ability, and it demonstrates the creative nature of God. And like you said, everything links into the gospel because it's setting up
Yeah.
people to be able to hear the gospel, and if they've got a distraction that's, meaning that they, because they can't hear the music or they can't read the words or
Yeah.
they can't, or whatever that may be,
Yeah.
there's a distraction there. And so everything that happens
Yeah.
links to the gospel. And
Does.
one thing I love about what you say is, you talked, I saw a blog of yours, and you're talking about how your role is kind of to be the support of the shepherds
Yeah.
of the church. And I think that what you do is you're very adept at being able to support the church leaders really, really well. But I'd love to talk to you about that role that you talk about being the sort of support shepherd.
Yeah.
How can we be the best, for those people that aren't in ministry, but also for people that are in ministry and wanting to set up people to be the best shepherds they can be, or the best support shepherds they can be.
Yeah.
What can leaders do to support those people to make sure that they're the best support shepherds that they can be?
Yeah. That's good. There's two things there, isn't there? Which is great. I think first of all, I would say, we can sometimes, as members of our church, put expectations on our leaders to say they should be doing this, this, and this, and this. And often those things that we're projecting onto them and asking them to do are things that are kind of outside of that their greatest calling. So they're called to know their flock, to teach their flock, to shepherd, to protect their flock in some ways, to go and seek after the lost sheep. That's what God's primarily called them to do. So we want the focus of those leaders and those listening, in that sense, focus on that. That's what we want. So anything else outside of that, I want to try and be able to help in some way. So if you're a member, what could you do to help support the teaching that's going on in the church? And that might be actually not bothering the pastor on certain days when he's preparing for his sermon. That could be helping to distribute materials that are put together for Sunday. Questions for group leaders that go out in the midweek. Somebody could take on that kind of role. So even just knowing who our flock are, we need a church database of some kind that can just coordinate and say, right, who are the people that God has called us to look after? And having kind of clear, structures in place where members could be running and organizing membership courses on behalf of the leadership team. And so there's lots of different ways that what could we do that are administrative things or organizational things, or even things that just take a little bit of headspace for a leader. How could we free them up so that they've got that space to do it? So one of the exercises I do with leaders through some of our consultation, and we'll throw this out here for free, is we do an exercise where we say to leaders, right, put everything that you do into three categories. Okay, what's essential that only you can do that's needed? What do you need to stop? And most leaders will know, okay, there's a few things I need to stop doing. And then what are the things that you need to start? Because that's an exciting conversation. There's always things that leaders are going, I need to be doing more men's ministry, or we need more women's ministry, or we should be doing more outreach. So those are things on that list. The things on the stop list are the things that I'm thinking, if every church knew what was on a leader's stop list, wouldn't that be really helpful? Because they're, I know most leaders I know are doing Sunday slides, they're doing their sermon prep slides, they're organizing administration for funerals and weddings, and they're dealing with database event setups. They're doing all this stuff. I'm like, that's the stuff that we want to free them from. Right, church leaders, church members, how can we members get behind this? And I think even just identifying them and then going, right, actually, who's really passionate about, I don't know, welcome, right? Let's put them in and let them develop a team and let them develop a strategy. So leaders have to be willing to kind of delegate stuff and give people responsibility. And if they're able to do that, and we can identify the things that would really help that leader, then that's where we need to, my job is matching members to that ministry stuff that needs doing. Because if we do the stuff on the stop list, the stuff on the start list is going to happen. And that for me is exciting.
Yeah, that's really, really exciting. I love the idea of every minister having a stop list. I think it's so important, and because there's so much stuff that I think a pastor does that they wish they could get off their list, and actually stuff that there probably is someone that could take that on in the life of the church. And I think for ministers watching this, listening to this, have a really good think. And it's okay to have a stop list. I think sometimes church leaders get guilty because they might be employed, and oftentimes they are, and they're thinking, I've got to justify my time. Yeah. And actually, what could you do with that time? And it could be that you put something on the start list, but it could be that you have extra time to be able to make that message just really more impactful on a Sunday morning, or you've got more time to put into prayer, and having those things that you can take off your list. But then that means that we need to find people that can take that, because often they're things that they have to happen in the life of the church. A church database needs to be there, but it shouldn't be the senior leader of a church that's doing that. So so we need to get better at delegation, certainly on this. And I wonder whether we need to get better at being more efficient as well in some things. Probably leads me to a really good next point, which I've been really wanting to ask you. When I was thinking about questions that I wanted to ask you, I really wanted to ask you about AI. Because when we're thinking about church management, we're now in the AI world, not just the digital world. Yeah. Gone are just pen and paper, gone are just computers. Now we are now in AI world. Yeah. How is the role of administration, church management? How do you see that changing, or how is it already changing in the world of AI?
Yeah, it's great, and I think different people have different opinions on whether we should use AI or not. I'm happy to use AI and would encourage people to, where they can use it. So I know lots of administrators and managers who are using it to help them like craft emails and kind of just get the right tones and think about those things. So there's those kind of low level tasks that are, like this is really good for that. I know church managers who are using it for design ideas or concepts and things like that. Can I get a leaflet for this and information on that? And it's almost done instantly, and it saves you huge amounts of time. I mean, some of the more exciting, more advanced stuff that I've seen the churches using AI in have been, they may transcript a whole sermon series on Romans, say, and then they'll put that transcript into another AI and go, could you create for me like a 5-week course for home group leaders for a group of 10 people? Could you come up with the questions and a little summary from each message? It's done almost instantly, and it's great. And we want to go through and we want to check it because we want to be confident that what we're giving people in church is good stuff. That as they meet together in that small group and they're going through those questions, we want that to be brilliant. But some of the stuff is coming out really, really well, and you can restrict it to your own content of what you've created, in terms of, like, say, the Roman series or something. So it's just getting better and better. And I think I wouldn't be hesitant of using it as thinking it's some sort of evil, but where could it be? Just give us that little uplift to get things done a little bit quicker. So, going to my graphic designer and saying, okay, here's some of the ideas that I've had through AI. Can you produce something like this? it's kind of brought a bit more clarity to what I really wanted it to look like. And we're using images and stuff like that everywhere, aren't we? In terms of, themes for sermons and slides before church, slides after, leaflets and posters and stuff. So there's some good stuff there, I think. So I wouldn't be hesitant to try and use it, and see how you get on.
Yeah, I used AI to create an image. So because it's a great way to be able to highlight a Bible passage.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
AI can kind of bring some of these things to life. Obviously, it's not going to be accurate, but you can hone it for accuracy.
Yeah.
But I think I did it of I'm trying to remember what it was. One of the Bible stories, just to be able to bring it a little bit to life, so people could see it, have a bit more sort of a visceral reaction to it, and just by doing one of the, something like that, it can really help. Or you can, like you said, automate things. I know I know of one person that uses it they'll take the preach and they'll use AI to chop up into social media content. And like you said, transcribing it, you could turn that into a blog, you can turn that into small group material, all from that one piece. And so it's it sort of does a lot of the legwork for you, doesn't it? And I think it's a really great tool, and it's not more than just Chat GPT. That's the other thing. I think most people use Chat GPT for funny songs and things like that. And recipes. It's good for recipes, very good for recipes. But more than
recipes,
that,
particularly maybe for you.
I think I'm going to have a kind of maybe a dessert prompt for those kind of things. It seems like everyone knows that I'm a big fan of dessert these days. So yes, brilliant. Well, I'd love to just finally, as we sort of come into land, love to get some final thoughts. I know there's a course that you're offering as well. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. So any final thoughts, and talk to me about the course as well.
Oh, that's kind. Yeah, there's two things that are kind of coming new for us as a church office. So over the last sort of 18 months, we've been putting together kind of what we call a good church management course, and it's kind of a 12 module course that's online, and that you can work through it at your own pace. And we've kind of got a whole stuff on a couple of modules on vision, and numbers on kind of policy, procedure, governance, all the things that you might be doing in church management, things going on. And then we talk about delivery. What is it like to kind of deliver ministry, and how do we build good cultures into churches, and the difference between team cultures, rota cultures. We start to open up questions like that. And so the course is available to buy. You can work through it yourself, and you get some coaching sessions included in it. And if you've got a particular need in a particular area, then you come across something that's really interesting in the course, then we can dialogue and chat to you about that. And then secondly, we're also launching a new service called the Church Assistant, and offering churches maybe who are in that kind of gap between sort of 50 members and 100, somewhere in there, and who don't have somebody to do some administration. Well, we're offering we've connected with some different administrators across the country, and we are looking at kind of providing a kind of remote service where we could do some of your administration. And you can pay us to do that, rather than employing somebody that you don't feel like you have somebody yet. So our heart in that is that we would love to kind of serve churches and serve some leaders with some administration, maybe try it out for 3 months. And then our heart of the church office is not to keep the work on an ongoing basis, but to look at ways of which we can help transfer that work back to the church. So if a church leader helps us, does it for 3 months with us, we learn how to do it, we learn how to serve them, and then be able to go, right, who in your church could do this on a voluntary basis or paid way? We want to support you back to that. So those are kind of two exciting, kind of new services that we're going, right, how can we make the church office sustainable? And these are two ideas that we've had. And so if they would be a blessing to you and you'd like to find out more, then, you're welcome to get in contact with me. Gavin at thechurchoffice.co.uk. The website will slowly be changing over the next few months to kind of reflect these new services. But this is a bit of an exclusive, Chris, mate, right on your podcast. So.
I'm always fan of an exclusive. That's always great. Gavin, thank you so much. That's brilliant. It feels like we've been able to break through the hard caramel top of church management today. So thank you so much for doing that. And I think for all ministers, check out the church office. There's so much there to help. And I think for especially, like you said, the services for administration for the church is 50 to 75 to 100, like a great service that would be really helpful for churches looking to take that sort of first step into getting administrative services set up. So yeah, Gavin, thank you so much for joining me today. Really enjoyed it, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks for having me. Great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of That CPD Show. For more episodes, why not subscribe and give us a review? It really helps us out. See you next time.